we are. Call to order the Comprehensive Land Use Planning Committee meeting. They have everyone stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. May I have a roll call, please?
Chairman Matthew Cobbler.
Here.
Member Tom Clary.
Here.
Member Johnny R. Coover.
Here.
Member Denise McKenzie. Let the record show that Member Denise McKenzie is absent from today's meeting.
Thank you. Do we have any comments from the general public? None signed up. Doesn't appear that anybody wants to speak. Comments from the city manager and committee members? Committee member Hoover?
I have none.
None. In the name of Secretary.
It's done enough.
But not on the record. And I have no comments. We'll get into the first agenda item, which is the introduction discussion of the Comprehensive Land Use Planning Committee. I'm sure everyone here is familiar with what the mission of the Comprehensive Land Use Planning Committee is. But to briefly go over it, in the charter, the charter creates a Comprehensive Land Use Planning Committee, and as a city, well, let me just read this real quick. City shall prepare a comprehensive land use plan which shall be in compliance with general law, the CLUP, as it were. When approved by the council, shall growth and expansion control plan. From time to time, in accordance with general law or when deemed necessary, the council shall appoint a 4-person committee to review and modify the CLUP. The city manager shall chair the committee. The other 3 members shall be qualified voters. Further in the code, it lays out what the powers and authorities are for the Comprehensive Land Use Plan Committee. It reads, the Comprehensive Land Use Plan Committee shall provide the Planning and Zoning Board and the City Council with recommendations regarding the Comprehensive Land Use Plan, along with pertinent information to substantiate their recommendations as provided in this chapter. Council called us forward for actually one primary reason, but there's been kind of an underlying issue going on as well that we're going to try to wrap up in the committee. I put in the agenda only one of those, which is the discussion primarily of the change in the land use plan related to the water overlay district. But at the same time, there are a number of updates being done by our planner as well, which we have, and we'll introduce her in a second, that I thought should have gone to this committee, but has not gone to this committee. And so hopefully we can kind of wrap it all together into one and present it then to, and I don't know what the time frame, we'll talk a little bit about that, into one recommendation, then onto the zoning, planning, zoning, and then on to City Council. Any questions on all that I just had? No. Okay.
Is this being recorded, by the way?
It is.
If we turn it off, will that
Do you need this or?
very big echo?
It should be, well, he's got to have it on in order to hear, but as far as my recording goes, but I'm trying to turn it down just a little bit. And
Okay.
everyone might hear it, turn it up.
Yeah, about
Maybe turn it down a little bit more?
Yeah. I think we might have blasted it, but I might hear it.
Oh, cool.
Okay. So let's start first with the item up. Go ahead.
I guess so much better.
Okay, thank you. Let's start with item number 2, which is the listed on the topic is Imagine Cody River Landing. And I want to introduce Tammy Varana of Varana Consulting. And she is the city's consultant as it comes to all these difficult planning issues that
This might not have been the best operation here, so, okay, well, thank you. Let me take my glasses off. My name is Tammy Varana, and as the city manager mentioned, my company is Varana Consulting, and I've been in business for myself for almost 17 years. And just to give you a little bit of background, I grew up in the area, went to Middle and Gulf High School, and my very first planning job was at Pasco County back in the late 80s. I also have supported the city in the past on a comprehensive plan. I believe it was in the early 90s. And at that time, the company I was working with was Wade Trim, and they were also helped the city to establish the waterfront overlay district. And at that time, I think it was called the Waterfront Intermodal Master Plan District. Anyway, there were some names that came about. And then most recently, over the past, I think it's 12 or 13 years, I've been supporting the city with just as needed, typically development review, any sort of zoning amendments and things like that, just whatever you guys need support with. So just to give you a little bit of background on myself. So the city manager asked me to put together just sort of a preliminary scope of services to engage the community into sort of a vision and a future for the Cody River Landing area. And it's been some time since the community went through a process like that. I think maybe, and I don't have all my notes with me, I wasn't prepared to give the whole history, but when the city, the community initially talked about the waterfront overlay district and what that vision entailed. And then you'll see a lot of that vision elements that are within the plan that was developed and also the land development regulations that were established for that. The comprehensive plan isn't very, I mean, there's a little bit on the waterfront overlay district, but not a ton, which I think it could be embellished as we move forward with updating the plan. We'll talk about that later. So I understand from, I watch your meetings at home. That seems like they pop up on the YouTube, and I'm like, oh, why not? I'll watch. So I understand that there is an interest in engaging the community, intently for anything, because this is their downtown, right? This is the center of the community. So what we had just preliminarily put together was that there would be, let me get down here a little bit so I can see. A community visioning workshop that would occur over a series of days. That the first one would bring everybody together to learn about the district, the data, the trends, just all the sort of information that we can put out in front of people so they can really get a sense of what's happening out there. What are the regulations that are in place today? What has been achieved? What hasn't been achieved? What remains to fulfill the initial vision? At that very first juncture, we would have stations that would be set up around a room with the different topics. It could be transportation, it could be land use here, it could be just different elements just to bring the community up to speed about really what's, because not everybody is really thinking about all these elements all the time. They're thinking about how they feel when they go to that, what sort of opportunities are there for them as they, interact with the area. So we also included in this a walking tour, so that after they leave the area where they're looking at the data, they could go over and actually be with people who could point things out to them and say, this is what we're working with. These are the streets, and this is kind of pointing things out to people that may not always be seeing those different facets when they're there, just engaging with enjoying the property, the district. Then the second day would actually be the visioning process. Get down there. Where we would bring everybody together in a room. We would recap the first day's activity, some of the observations that would be made, and then we would look into the day 2 activities, and that would go over sort of the demographic policy and a marketing questionnaire, so getting some sense of who's in the room, how they use the district, what's going on with the market in the area, what types of retail would be appropriate there. Just we would come up with questions that we would start the session off with. And then there would be some opportunity for people to interact with imagery, so a visual preference survey or some type of graphics to where people could say they could lean towards do you like this or do you like this? Do you like this? Do you like this? And then that would be a quantitative, like a ranking process to where you would actually get some numeric, indications as to what people's preferences are for the area. And then the third day of the workshop would be coming back with a vision translation. So what did we learn on day 1 and day 2? And then we would roll that into some scenarios. So based on what the community heard, we could show different ways that the input could be translated into imagery, and that we would present those results, indicating the key preferences, providing a shared understanding of what people like for the visual preferences of the area, and then we'd get them together in small groups so that they could look at how the things that they learned about on the previous days could be incorporated into a vision for the area. And then there would be a third opportunity. This would be later after things have been pulled together. I actually skipped ahead to that, so blank out the area about the synthesis because that'll take a little bit of time. Bringing people together, saying that this is what came out of the process. What do you think? Do you think that this conveys what the community's values and preferences are for the area? So essentially it would be workshopping over 3 days, coming back with a synthesis of the information, and getting the public's input on that final synthesis of the information. And then from there, the city would do scoping as to what needs to be done to fulfill that vision, including, but not limited to, amending your comprehensive plan to look at what's allowed in the waterfront area per the future land use map, and then also in the land development code relative to maximum height and maximum floor area ratios and different sort of development intensity sort of standards. So that is just one way that we came up with, but certainly we are open to the committee's insights and familiarity and expertise.
And let me just say that we wanted to come in here with an idea so we could discuss an idea to try to put together kind of what the public believes to be the vision for that area. But we want your input in saying we need more of this, less of that, or ask questions of what the vision is for that public input. Let me take a step back though. Good. So this process, if ultimately we have to complete a amendment to the community plan, the way this, correct me if I'm wrong, the way this would work is first, this committee would make a recommendation on the planning, then ultimately on to the city council that we needed to make a change to the comprehensive plan. Then council would agree if they wanted to, say they do. We would send, I think, right after they do the legislation, the first reading of the legislation, it goes on to the state, if I'm not mistaken, and they have to review it for a certain time.
Yeah, so because it would entail not only a future land use plan amendment, but also text amendments to your comprehensive plan, it would be more, it's not a rigorous review because there's like some layers now with the comp plan amendments, so like small scale amendments aren't even required to be sent to the state. But for text amendments or higher level, like updating your entire comprehensive plan, there is a state review process, about 60 days.
So again, the thing that we need to flesh out as part of this, and we need to get the public input on, is again, one of the driving factors is a developer that wants to do a fairly comprehensive change to the district. And the two main areas that they would be seeking the city to change their comprehensive plan is in the height restrictions or allowable heights within that WOD, as well as the density. Although we don't have exact numbers, we have estimates of what they're asking for. that's something we have to flesh out in terms of what the community is willing to do there, if anything, related to a change in the plan going forward.
And we also thought it might be important that with the different scenarios that might evolve through this, is to tie sort of what the community benefits would be to having a different or a refreshed vision in the area. So, what sort of public amenities or just, pretty much public amenities. How can this district embody the community wants to see out of it? Out of a downtown, there's a lot of public space, opportunities for, walking and shopping and recreating and, so how could a development scenario help you facilitate or fund some of those community amenities that the public wants to see? So there might be a way of looking at, if when you have this, you can afford this, or you can partner to get certain amenities. But that is something that certainly, how that's rolled out will need to be discussed and, a strategy developed.
My guess is the first step is actually we'll have to get this engagement so we can start that process, because
Correct.
nothing's going to move without this going forward.
Exactly.
The state won't even bother looking at it unless we can say we've gotten input from the
Yep.
citizens, done all the back work instead of trying to ram something through.
That's true.
They want to see the process followed, probably more than actually what comes to the modifications of the text. They don't, whatever we want is kind of what we want to a degree.
Yeah.
But they want to make sure that everyone has had their input and they don't have someone coming in at the back end at the end saying, I never had my representation, I never had any input, and this whole thing's been ramrodded through. So I think the first step is, I agree with this, getting a draft put together, and the only reason I'm looking at it is because I have it digitally, the proposal digitally. The concern I have for this proposal, and I know you said it's a draft work and copy, is I guess kind of simplifying it somewhat. You're looking at 3 separate dates, not necessarily full days for this. So ideally, it's a workshop event in the evening.
A charrette light. I mean,
Right.
and we can talk about the services that would be available at that charrette, but typically a charrette allows for sort of people coming and going, and not necessarily it's a whole day. They might, maybe some activities are during the day, maybe some are in the evening, but you have an opportunity for someone to plug in at somewhere along, and not everybody is interested in the start to the end. They want to just come in and hear what's going on. But other people may be more hands-on, and they want to do that walking tour, and they want to touch and feel the data and supplement the data. Like to say, what do we have? What's additional information that we need that will help us make a better decision in this area? So this is a little bit more of a intensive sort of approach that people could plug in how they wanted to. But we were trying to figure out a way to make it as meaningful in the early process as we could, as opposed to just saying, well, we're going to, and usually we do like 3 touch points with the community. Like we're starting off, here's the intro, this is what we're planning on doing, and we're going to engage you. And then you develop stuff, and then you go back to them and say, based on what we heard from you in that first point, the input stage, did we get it right? And then you go back and finalize it, and then you say, this is what we came up with. So it's essentially those 3 touch points. This one just has a little bit more of a rigorous beginning. And only because we heard that you wanted to have really substantial public engagement on this, but that's up to interpretation. So
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that public engagement personally is great and needed. I think, again, we're a small community. Everyone knows the WOD. They know the area. They we're only, 3 square miles tops. I'm not sure the walking tour is as important for that, because they know where the WD, they know geographically where the WOD is. We can outline the limits of the WODs to tell them what we're talking about. I think, and again, 2 council members, you could probably tell me more, but the more important part is especially with this upcoming potential development, the public needs to be made aware of what some of these changes entail. So I happen to know a little bit about the upcoming development. I know, that they're looking to increase the height of the buildings. What does that mean to me as a resident? Probably more importantly, though, right now the WOD is 8 units per acre, I believe, is its current zoning. They're looking to substantially increase that. What does that mean, and what does that look like? Because if I told you you're going from 8 units per acre to 50 units per acre, I know what that means. You know what that means. He may not know what that means in general, and that's really the explanation we need to give the resident.
And truly, it means different things in different contexts.
Correct, and it's so, but the overall impacts, I'm in development as part of my business, so I know what different things happen. The average citizen does not know.
Right.
And in terms of the proposal, I think we really need to spend less time as to what the area is, because everyone knows what the area is here, but what the area could look like or what these changes entail. If I go from, and I think it's 75 feet here, 72 feet, and they were looking to go to 90 or something like that at one point. 110. So what does that mean in the grand scheme of things? What does a 72-foot building look like versus a 110-foot building? 2 more floors. But how do we explain that to a resident and say, well, okay, yeah, does 2 more floors really impact you? Maybe not. That's the resident's choice. But also probably and to me the more important one is the density that they're going after, because that.
And I think as you alluded to, coming up with that number it can mean different things in different contexts, and it's just all how you arrange things, and perhaps it's more of like a visual. So we were preparing this idea of a visual preference survey to where people could react to different elements. I mean, it could be buildings, and it could also be the streetscape. What's the public realm look like in this area? Because in a lot of cases, when you're in an area and the public realm is right, you really can't even see the buildings. I mean, you can if you're across the river and looking this way, because that might be of concern to community members. But really, what is the what are the preferences and what are the possibilities in this area? Because maybe if people see what the possibilities are, then maybe it wouldn't be such a stretch to change the vision that exists today. Because right now the vision is for like a fishing village, or like a quaint, and I worked on that earlier plan, and certainly have worked a lot with West Pasco communities, and everybody wants to be a small town and just have that sort of feel. But then in other cases, you really do get a lot of, especially in a location where you don't really have a downtown. You have your center there, you have some businesses, but I think that, is there a want for more in the community? I don't know. I mean, that's something that would need to be drawn out within these community meetings. And I think the visuals, if people can react to visuals as opposed to metrics, because that's abstract. I even have a hard time understanding. It has to be like, that's why we thought the walking tour would be good, because you've been there, you've gone to eat dinner and you've walked around and you've been there a million times, but have you really ever looked at what it could be? Like, and that's maybe something that the layperson is just not thinking about.
The other problem that many people run into, I'm familiar with this, is even if you walk down the streets, if I stuck a 110-foot building, 85-foot building, whatever the number is, next to you, they wouldn't be able to comprehend, standing on a street, what does 72-foot buildings look like right next to me? And that's where we have to make sure, especially if we're looking to increase it, we have to make sure everyone understands what that looks like at the end of the day
Yeah.
and the impacts overall. Because
Impacts.
now you're actually looking at ladder trucks and other impacts
Right.
to it for fire perspective. Because
Physical impact.
yeah, there is physical impacts. There's infrastructure impacts.
Fiscal, yeah, and physical, yeah, both.
Physical, there's I lost my train of thought. Totally lost my train
Yeah,
of
there's environmental, there's aesthetic, there's,
thought. There's traffic impacts. There's all kinds of impacts that the density and the height specifically and probably most directly impact over the course of the city. That's fine if everyone wants to go in that direction, but they need to understand, and part of this committee, and I think council's committee and yours and everybody's is, all right, if we want to go in this direction, this is what you're getting at the
You
end
have to
of the day.
understand that.
And make sure we show that to them as best as possible. The first pass at that is this draft, and that's why I'm going into a long-winded explanation, because again, less important, everyone knows what we have right now. I think personally, I think a walking tour of the area, they're not going to be able to comprehend what those impacts of even if they were to build it to what's currently designed, what those impacts are.
right.
And also, again, there's a reason for density versus height, because that gives you square footages at the end of the day. The reason you go for square footages is it's the level of what is being built there, the quality of the multifamily that is going in there versus a business. Because the 8 units per acre is affecting directly your multifamily. You still have FAR, I believe, well above that. So that's where you get your retail and your other establishments. The density affects, and I'll use for an example, if I have an 8-story building and I have 8 units per acre and I have an 8-story building on 1 acre, I can put 8 units in. So that is 8 units of very high-end condo type development. If I quadruple that to 50 units per acre, my square footage is a minimum there of only 1,100 square feet or whatever in that area. That's a lower end residential unit just by its mere square footage. Do the people understand what they're getting by either raising their height restrictions and or keeping their height restrictions the same and raising the densities? The units get smaller.
Right.
Better for a developer because he gets a better return on his investment. But is that the quality of the unit you want in your prime area downtown? That's something they have to look at as well and understand what they're getting.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot to this change overall that we generally have to lay out. It's fine if they want it, but they got to understand what they want.
So let me add a bit to this. So when you talk about the walking tour and that, you tell me I should take them down there with,
And that first day activity could just be taken away. If you think that there's a lot of familiarity.
well, yeah, so I guess what I was getting at is, I don't, like Todd says, take them down there, they're familiar with it. You're not going to be able to put virtual buildings up so they can, kind of see what they're doing, but you could do that in a virtual environment. And I don't know if this is an option or not, but they do have virtual goggles or whatever that you can walk through something. I don't know if that's something you guys do or not, but even not that, just on the screen, kind of a guided tour that you guys have put together, a flyby, if you will, to kind of give them a feel that they're kind of seeing what it's going to be like.
Or similar areas that have that, Safety Harbor probably has something very similar already intact. What does Safety Harbors look like with this similar density and just a visual representation of what they're getting? Not necessarily even to the waterfront overlay. If I take you to Tampa, Tampa has a lot of areas. Ybor City has a lot of areas of where that's trying to go. Maybe just even a video tour of that area and say, this is where it's going. Is this what you want here in waterfront overlay?
And I think that's a good point. And also I think you're almost bringing the walking tour inside by using,
Logistically, you're going to,
yeah.
I don't know how many people are going to show up for this in different times of day.
And you're trying.
and corral them all together, it'd be tough to do that. And I don't know if it had any value, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I don't know if you want to, wouldn't walk from here to there, but it would be something where you could point things out, and you certainly could point things out on a screen, and it just wouldn't be the same impact of like seeing how much is out there versus like what you remember from the last time you were there in this particular context. But certainly that first day, if there's not enough value, or think people won't participate, or they don't need to do that, we could take that one away and then incorporate sort of the context presentation in the body of the second day. And I think what you mentioned too, sorry to point, it's my bad habit.
If that's the worst thing that happens.
I think about in Safety Harbor because we do have one development in downtown that seems to, I've looked at all the metrics of it, and it's a nice development. It has commercial and office, like retail office, and it has apartments on the back, and it's on 1 acre. So you can kind of visualize, 1 acre, this is 1 acre in the waterfront district or the Cody River Landing, and perhaps you could think about that development being plopped down. And that helps me. I'm not an urban designer or a physical planner. I'm more of a policy planner, but we may want to get some expertise in-house to help sort of, bridge these two things together. So I'm a public involvement specialist and a policy planner, but I'm not an architect. And I think an architect might be able to, and even put the graphics, as you're saying, together for the scenarios.
And I like the current state, take in context as well. You start off with here's the slate, maybe a drone fly over, whatever. Here's what we're looking at, and kind of focus on an area like, say, the old trailer park lot, that big area there. Here's what it is now. Here's the footprint, and then you take whatever your model is, and you kind of overlay that. And say, if we did something like this is what would it look like and feel like, kind of.
It gives you a sense of scale of
Yeah.
what could fit there, and also what the character of it and how it relates potentially to the rest of the district. Because there's a lot of different parcels out there, and how they all fit together is going to be important. But that's, how you work that into your regulations is like a next step. But, it's good to be thinking ahead as to what you would do.
Another question I had, because obviously this comprehensive land use plan update encompasses much more than just the WOD. That's just a piece of it, right? So is this an iterative approach that we can, because obviously time is of the essence on the WOD portion of it. Is it okay to focus on that, make any updates to that, and then come back and look at other sections of the city as well? Or do you have to do it all at once, or how's that work?
You don't have to do it all at once. There is an update, and they call it an evaluation and appraisal report, and then you identify. It used to be a much more rigorous or more involved process where you did a visioning, like I did it in Newport Richey back in the middle 2000s, I guess, and we did a major issues visioning, and so we came up with 5 or 6 things that we were going to focus on in updating the comp plan, and we went through that. But the state took that requirement away. Now all the cities have to do, and counties, is to say, where don't you match the statute? So it's a very quick process. We do need to do that type of an update within, I think we need to have it in by July. Sooner would be better, I think, just to done. But
That was the other piece that I thought we could wrap into this. And that's the work order that Tammy had put together for those other elements based upon that review that we.
yeah, the review. But you can update your comprehensive plan. There's no limit anymore. There used to be 2 times a year, but now there's no limit. So you could address that, because that's easy, that piece that is in front of you. There's some things to do, but it's not, I don't think it's a big community decision point.
This is a statutory thing, requirement that we got to do it every
7 years,
7 years.
every 7 years.
So then we're due for that, right? So we have to do something.
It's not a lot. I think, maybe in the past it was just a couple of things that you had to do. This one has a water supply facilities work plan that's a little bit more involved. The peril of flood, which I'm working on that now, and actually at your next meeting, I'd like to present those preliminary ideas for the peril of flood policies, just to get your thoughts on that before we send it off to the state. Those would actually be incorporated in this June, July submittal based on that statutory requirement. But for your grant, under the vulnerability assessment, the state DEP wants to just look at your preliminary parallel flood policy. So it doesn't have to be adopted, just as like, this is what we're kind of tracking to update. So there's a lot of different layers here, but if you want to go into a more in-depth update of your comprehensive plan, because it's a 2020 plan right now, which means that it didn't expire, but the horizon is 2020. So you probably want to push that out to, 2030, probably 2040 to do a 10-year plan, at least 10 years. Has to be at least 10 years, but it could be more. But I know that you're updating your community redevelopment plan right now. You're probably going to get a lot of good information from that would fit within your comprehensive plan somehow. So I think a lot of your heavy lifting is probably going to happen in that community redevelopment plan that we can.
Ironically, though, a lot of this actually intertwines back with what we're first thing we were just talking about. Because if this, the first thing, meaning that actually significantly influences this plan from your water supply, your transportation plan, and then it flips back to the CRA plan, because then if that's redeveloped, that actually gets pulled out of the CRA. There's no way the state would ever allow that to stay in the CRA. Now the CRA basically becomes grant and that little area and a little bit of the south side of it. And that's it. That's your CRA. So, you're having a lot of, and the reason I'm saying this is, you're having the upcoming CRA discussions based off of an idea of a sum coming in. If this goes through, which amends this, the fund coming in go down.
But is it true that it would have to come out? I mean, it hasn't been achieved yet. It's only till after, when you go to do your renewal, if there's another CRA, because I know that they always get to the end and you decide if they're going to. Have you had your renewal? Like, they're usually 30.
I don't think the renewal's been done yet, but
Yeah.
I mean, from
It's
a
not-
planning
not until
perspective,
2032 is when it's
Okay.
supposed to be renewed.
yeah,
We're
but in
talking
reality,
about-
though, from a planning perspective, just looking at what the council's looking at, a lot of it is intertwined because the development goes through. Look, if these people don't do it and all of those changes, somebody's going to do it. It's
Right.
just the growth of the area,
Matter of what
of
you do.
the who and the what. Yeah,
The
exactly.
vision.
So all that comes out, though, is the end result, and that significantly impacts your CRA. So if this goes through, do you really want to have the planning of the CRA that's going to have to change in 3 years anyway? Theoretically.
What-
Yeah, I'm here just to make things nice and easy for everybody.
about the CRA plan, and that's tracking through. And certainly, I think there's one public engagement event for that CRA plan. So
Yeah, I mean, you can do it.
it's not intensive enough to really focus on that district, but I think it could open the door to future discussions on the district. I mean, and you're right, everything fits together, and that's always the conundrum that we're in, was like, oh, but that plan is going to be adopted in 3 years, but you just have to
Yeah.
start,
You gotta start somewhere.
somewhere. Maybe that's what we kind of all, kind of in my mind, I'm thinking relative to the comp plan and the statutory requirements and the overall update and the CRA plan. I kind of have a sense on how those would work together, but this waterfront piece is a little bit more of a, it's a big step for the community. So I think that you need to have a lot of attention.
It's the single biggest impact the city you'll ever see.
Yep.
What's the statutory deadline? July something?
I think we have to have them in, I think it's July 5th, if I recall.
Is it feasible to touch up what needs to be touched up, I guess, with this stuff here, and look at the WOD and whatever changes? I mean, could that process coincide with this, or we need to do this kind of separate stream and then come back?
You can do them concurrently, easily.
Yeah, you could do them concurrently. I think
But you may not make.
Yeah.
It may You may process them with different, I'll say like staff reports, like this is what's going through and, you bring it to your planning and zoning board and city council. But maybe at the same time, there's also another amendment the packages are going together at the same time.
So they don't have to be, they could,
Yeah,
we could get this done and then say in July, if that's the date, and then turn around and amend it in August.
if you had an applicant that was coming in to amend you had two applicants for the future land use map, they could both go at the same time. Just two packages that go, they track together, but because the state would probably be looking at different things with a bigger land use plan amendment and text amendments for the comp plan. And, and as you mentioned before, they'll scrutinize it, and it's not so much the public engagement as it is impact. So can the roads handle it? Do your pipes handle it? What are the environmental impacts? And they're looking more at regional or statewide impacts. They're not really so micro focused on every little thing as they've been in the past. But certainly, DOT is going to want to make sure that US 19 is still flowing well, and that, just that there's going to be your basic level of service standards are going to be able to continue to be met, and that there's not any major environmental impacts.
I mean, the biggest thing that would affect is the sanitary and the water. 19 will handle almost anything if it's large enough.
Yeah.
It's the individual city level. How does Pasco County sewage adopt this?
Right.
And that, again, that flows right back to your densities.
Right, but in the development, when they put that plan together, there's impact fees and stuff to modify those, both on the city level and the county level, no?
There's a lot of cities and counties cities more usually, that'll come back and say, you know what? We do not have the capacity to take your development right now. You're done. Come back to us in 2 to 3 years. And the developer will be sitting there with his impact fees, but his impact fees are calculated based off of the size of the development, not necessarily what the city needs. So let's say, for instance, to make all of our developments go through and we blow out everything in the city and we want to be a little mini Tampa. If Pasco County has to build a new sanitary sewage treatment plant, you could pay all the impact fees in the world. It's 5 years before you get a sanitary sewage fee or sanitary sewage plant built and operational minimum.
You can't get a certificate of occupancy until you have the services in place.
They won't even issue the permit because you have to get usually they call it a notice of capacity from the local jurisdiction that says, yes, we can, as of looking right now, yes, we can take this development. You don't get that, you won't even get a building permit.
So
You don't even get approval to go through a building permit.
in my mind, not my field expertise, obviously, but normally you don't necessarily have large overcapacity, so let stuff come in and fill that. Normally, the stuff is coming in, being developed, and you have to catch up to what you need, right? So in our case, whatever this density would be for this particular project, we may need an additional well, additional sewer capacity, whatever, bigger pipe size. As part of that development, I would think that would go together, that infrastructure upgrade with the project itself. They wouldn't build it and we'd be okay with it. And if we aren't okay with it, they wouldn't build it. That would be the driving force that would actually make those modifications.
To a degree, yes, you are correct. But it's where does it end? So you build on a new development. This new development would need new water lines, new sewer lines, probably new pump stations, all of that. Within the city, that would say yes. But okay, so it goes to a pump station that's in the city. Then the pump station pumps to this pump station that's out of the city.
Mm-hmm.
Can that line support the upgrade? Can that pump station now support then it goes to the treatment plant itself. Can the sewage treatment plant? The developer is not going to pay for all the upgrades all the way to the sewage treatment plant, including the sewage treatment plant. The county will just say, no, there's no capacity, and then it stops all the way back to here.
So let's say this, just to further explain this. So let's say the capacity of the city, we can handle that, or whatever that, they're coming in. So instead of 6-inch pipes, we need 8-inch pipes down, or whatever that is. And that all gets taken care of during the development, whatever. As we hand that off, obviously part of that planning process, I would think, goes beyond just the city. Don't they have to work with the county too? Because
That's where
there's
actually it
impact
goes
fees to the
back
county as well, right?
Because the state comes in and says, well, you're amending your comprehensive land use committee because now you want to put in the WOD district super dense 12,000 unit condo complex. That's where and I'm now pointing at you, but that's where she said that the city or the state reviews all of this because they say, well, wait a minute, now City of Port Richey wants to put in 12,000 units. Can the whole area just support this, or is this silly? And that's
That's what you would need to demonstrate as the city. And also the adjacent local governments, the county and Newport Richey would also be one of those reviewing agencies because there's a whole,
where the amendment to the comprehensive
right.
plan use, that's where it all comes
So
again.
once you have the vision that the community's preference for this area, you can start to pencil that out to see, well, can we achieve that? What is it going to cost? From the public side, what sort of participation could be by the private side. There's all that, and you're probably more in a position to think about some of like how those things all get hashed out because it really is it's a negotiation, right, between your development, and the public expenditures. But from a policy perspective, we'd have to look at what are the impacts, and it's at the top of whatever it is you're asking for as far as your density and intensity, what is the impact of that future land use category, density, intensity on your ability to meet your level of service standards?
In our analysis, do we look outside the city for this? This is just within our boundary, right?
It is, but
We submit it, and then they look at it, right?
right.
Yeah, but again, we're kind of diverging. For a development of that size, you would actually have to address the developer, at least in the city, should mandate that there's a sign off from intent, the adjacent county services to make sure. So they have to go through county. Should have to go through county approval because it's their utilities also supporting that of the city.
And there is an interlocal agreement that all the local governments share their development proposals with each other so that they can weigh in anything that might be extra jurisdictional impact.
And again, I don't know the size of this development. It's substantial from what I saw. So especially through all those phases. So it would impact your overall comprehensive plan. And that's why I keep circling back. You kind of got to take, yes, you can put it through, but if you put through, we're not touching our comprehensive plan that much and tweak. Oh, by the way, here's all this. And now we got to go back through and then put this back through again. And it's just a massive pile of food.
Well, I think in the timing of this, so these things will be going on simultaneously. I think we would be in a position before the July information has to go to have a pretty good understanding from the public's perspective where this is kind of going, right?
Yeah, we got to get it. We got to get their impact.
Yeah.
And even though the water supply facilities work plan would be an opportunity too to think about, because you're going to be looking at your system, what your water supply is, what's the projected population or water. Usually the demand is based on your population, but it incorporates your non-residential uses as well. But how are your plans for the future affecting your ability to provide water? So that's also a good opportunity that this is happening at the same time.
I believe we're bumping up against our capacity at this point from our,
Your water use plan?
not on the water,
No.
so we're still good?
Yeah,
Oh, good. Oh, that's a positive.
that's what I was told. But we don't, have a master plan for that and system analysis, so
Yeah.
I
And-
reserve the right to change
Yeah, and
that.
that would
Trust to verify.
Yeah.
And that would need to be really evaluated too, because if there is a substantial impact, you can't sink any more wells, I believe. I don't know for that for sure, but one, you have to verify it if you can or you can't. If you can't sink and you're at your capacity, you're now buying water. What does that look like to the citizens? And if we're buying water, theoretically our water rates may go up. I don't know.
It's more expensive.
It is more expensive to purchase it than pump it. So, and the reason I'm bringing that up is that needs to be brought up because once they vote on it and it goes through, that's great if you want to see the growth. Your property values will likely go up. That's the bonus. Is that in the citizens' interest? Because there's going to be negatives to it. Well, there'll be changes. I won't say negative. There'll be changes. It won't be the sleepy little city.
I'm just scrolling through the WOD goals from that 2002 plan, and there were 5 main goals: to enhance and revitalize the city's economic focal point, to improve physical image, to protect the natural environment, allow a variety of commercial uses, and improve internal compatibility and function.
I'm not sure what that 5th one means, but the first 4 would be impact.
Well, the internal compatibility, I think, are land uses because, back in the day, and probably still, there's probably some uses that aren't like totally compatible with the vision. And then the function, how those all work together, because that's important too in a district, especially one that you want to be walkable. And so that's just an aside.
Your best path forward is to get both of these executed with the we made so you can start this because you're running out of time.
Yep. That's why we're here today.
Have a, and I guess we'll have to work on the visual preference aspect of the elements that we show and how we go about finding the images. So if you have a variety, if you have any ideas on other districts or other downtowns that you think could offer different scale that the community could react to, I mean, you mentioned Safety Harbor as one, but
Again, there's several that, I mean, Ybor City has that density and what they're looking for, not necessarily on the water, but they have several areas
yeah.
that, again,
There's so much that's been built in the last 3 years. It's just wherever you go, there's like a whole new.
and since the developer is driving not this one, but the other one, maybe they can make a little path to work with their architect, because their architect does that kind of stuff all day long.
Right.
And just find some suggestions, because he had areas that he was thinking of when they were putting the design together. And so start working with that so they can start displaying what they're going to, to the citizens.
I think that was their intent to work with us.
They offered to help in any way they could to get this completed. So
Yeah, I'm sure they're going to be extraordinarily helpful as much as they can. Again, we have to make our separation,
Right.
make sure we maintain distance, but they can suggest what they were thinking of so we can suggest it to the citizens.
Yeah.
There's absolutely nothing wrong with that.
I think transparency is your friend, at this point, which you understand.
Well, not only that, I mean, as things come up, I think they're willing to tweak.
There's going to be tweaks.
Yeah.
What you saw is not what's going to go through ultimately. I'll virtually guarantee it because I've yet to see an initial concept go through unimpeded.
Right. Yeah.
It will be the first time in my 25-year career.
and I had this note to ask after this conversation, but this is a good, I think, part to get into. Is there value in having them come to a committee meeting, talk about what their plans are? We can maybe have this conversation with them related to preparing some of the visuals potentially for our public engagement.
I mean, for this part, for the comprehensive, the total comprehensive, there's probably no need.
Right.
For their individual part, again, it can't hurt to work with them. I don't know if you want them there yet. You may want to talk with your attorney on it, because then does that become a public hearing on the development?
Right.
I don't know that answer. I've never shown up to something like that before, but that doesn't necessarily mean anything. But you do have to make sure that, if it's coming up on upcoming agenda items, what's that delineation? And is there a delineation before that? But they can provide assistance as to what they were thinking of and what direction and what does that look like in what comparable areas, so it can be displayed for public review. If they even, if the public's even interested, because you may put it up and our citizens say, no, I want that sleepy little old area and that's all I care about. And there's massive about, in which case that kind of kills the rest of this fairly quickly.
Hey, just to clarify something, relative to the density, the future land use category in the commercial mixed use, which is the lion's share of the area, is 18 units per acre. But you mentioned at 8, is that?
So on the WOD, that there was, since it falls under its own category, that falls to 8 units per acre.
Well, I'm looking
I could be wrong.
I'm looking at the WOD zoning, and these are my notes, but I don't see any, and I was pointing out the standards. I don't see,
Maybe it is 18. It's been a while since I looked at it.
but I will tell you just
Didn't see the
for
warrant.
our own info. So it's 18 units per acre per the land use category and a 0.6 FAR. So that's pretty low.
That's very low.
It's very low.
What's
Oh, the floor area ratio.
How much building you can put on your property. So if you have a 1 acre parcel, your building footprint plus its improvements can be 0.6 acres.
So you could be 1 acre and 60% of that could be building footprint. Or you could do 2 stories and you could only be using 30% of your footprint. So you can go tall. And that's one of the potential advantages to going a little taller, is that you could have more land area for public amenities, green space, and things like that. And that also, well, then parking's a whole other situation, so that's,
That is, the citizens really need to understand, because that original, I didn't even realize that was that low. That
0.6.
it's quite low. That is not a dense area at all. So they would actually, I'm surprised they haven't even talked to you about increasing that ratio yet.
I'm sure it's all been evaluated, and, I mean, they know that something needs,
The pictures I saw, they had it,
oh, no, I think they're thinking that the comp plan would need to be amended
oh, okay.
to support,
Yeah, because they were pretty much curb to curb from what I saw
yeah.
on it. So yeah, that citizens really need to understand that
I think a
will look nothing like it does.
I think a good strategy might be to look at some of those different locations that have sort of a character that would be conducive to a downtown district of this size, and look at different building heights, what's on a parcel, almost like, I keep referring back to the not Zephyr Hills, Safety Harbor one, because I have looked at that one site and evaluated, what the FAR and the density is.
Developer and tell them, here's downtown Safety Harbor.
Yeah.
Here's downtown Dunedin. Here's
Or even like districts of St. Petersburg.
or yeah, whatever. And as another one, here's what is also being proposed by the developer. Where does it fall in these? I have no idea where it falls, but at least that gives people something to look at and compare to.
Well, we talked about like four scenarios that would start with what's envisioned there today under the 0.6 and 18 units per acre, all the way to, what this maximum might be, which it might be this ask, right? But then there's in between maybe 2 more.
Yeah.
That we kind of, and it's something to react to and say, well, we like this one, but not, maybe a little less, or we like this one, but a little bit, so it's something that maybe you could do the sliding scale of what's appropriate for Port Richey. And maybe the community could grasp, that.
Even at 18 units per acre, that isn't super dense. That's a higher end multifamily.
Yeah. Another thing about residential too is what you were alluding to with the square footage is, density, 1 unit can be a giant unit or it could be a tiny unit.
And that's usually what you go for it with it, so.
And I guess that's a matter of how much square footage do you want to cede over to residential in this district, or, you know, because I don't know if residential was initially discussed, was it? It was? Okay. Okay.
They're looking for fairly, I mean, the drawings I saw.
No, today in your vision,
Oh,
was residential,
No, it's all commercial.
no, it was a mix.
I mean, the future land use does allow for a mix, but I didn't know that the WOD,
It was all commercial down there.
maybe it did.
Right now, it's all commercial,
That's
yes.
what she's asking.
I thought it
Well,
was
no, I
mixed
thought
use.
what the initial vision was for is what she asked.
Is the initial vision a mixed use, commercial and?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what it was.
The zoning, it doesn't allow for that, does it?
Zoning allows for,
This is the waterfront overlay district, zoning.
that's the 18 units that I was,
This is waterfront, this is zoning, to allow for a variety of commercial uses, including recreational aquatic activities, eating establishments, and specialty retail, to allow the conversion of the waterfront into an attractive destination. I don't believe it mentions residential.
change that, you gotta change everything for that.
Because I thought that the properties that were purchased and demolished was to convert that from residential to commercial, so they couldn't be residential.
They were a single-family residence, which falls under an R1.
Little different, right?
The reason they were demolished is an R1 is a non-conforming completely in that district. So if there was multifamily there, 4 units plus, that would fall under a commercial aspect multifamily. But that doesn't, I mean.
This does, so there
theoretically, though,
does need to be a little bit of primer as to what the vision is and what the standards say, to say this is what you can do today in this area. And this is what you've achieved so far, and this is what remains to be achieved. And then talking about these different scenarios, and so that people can understand, well, today, residential component is not included.
Yeah.
what you can do, though, is
You know, what are the benefits to having residential in this district, or what are the pros and cons of the different land use mix that you would have out there? In some cases, when you've got residential in a district, people can live and work and play within that one spot, and they don't have to add to the traffic. But then if you're limited, you know, or you have a parking scheme in mind, where maybe parking,
all that's going to go on parking garages. There's no way around it. You have to do
yeah, but where? Where are the park?
the buildings that you're building.
Okay, well,
That's why raising the again, we're kind of getting ahead of ourselves a little bit. Raising the building height restrictions, you kind of need it for the parking garages because you don't have, depending on what densities, you got to park them somewhere. You can't keep parking them in the open fields that you are. So it's got to go in a podium parking garage,
right.
and your building goes on top of it. So you need a higher building to allow.
It could be like what Newport Richie's has, a parking structure and a circulator.
The only people who are putting in parking garages are governments because everything else is
Very expensive.
on 30 years, and who knows what's going to be happening in 30 years with transportation. So
Yeah.
only
What about that parking that you're putting on the pedestal parking, though? Isn't that,
yeah, but that's part of the building, and that's owned by the condo owner. So technically, when they buy their unit, they also buy the parking
Right.
space at $30,000 a space. So the developer actually makes money on the parking garage, or on the parking garage, and makes money on the unit themselves
yeah,
on a sale basis. If you go, there's other criteria to that as well. But for the city to put in a parking garage to support the developer would be absolutely asinine.
Yeah, don't quote me on this, but I want to say that they had parking plans. As a matter of fact, I think they were some new technology type parking plan or something, like that Carvana stuff where you.
Yeah. Okay. But anyway,
I mean, there's a lot of things that,
on a podium.
So to kind of wrap back to where we need to be. So with the scoping for this, do you feel that you have enough from this dialogue to put something together to get us there for the OW?
yeah, I think I'll go back and, based on what I've heard, I'll revise the scope, and then you guys are going to meet again in
2 weeks, wasn't it?
February, late February.
Yeah.
Why?
So then we can also talk about the peril of flood preliminary peril of flood policy?
I was thinking towards the end of February to the beginning of March. So
And you were,
What I think I'll do is, because I'll put hours to this time, having a sense of where you guys want to go. But would you like me to look into, like, getting an architect or an urban, I mean, just to like a side scope, or if we need it? I know that you've been working with Ayers, and there's an architect there that I work with. His name is Benoit Panic. And so maybe, I don't think he's done work for you in the waterfront district, but they're a national firm. So it might be good just to,
reach out and find out what that partnership will look like.
yeah. So I think it just would be good to consider.
So I was thinking the week of the 26th.
February 26th.
Well, it doesn't have to be the 26th, but yes, February 26th. Could be the 29th.
Let's do the 29th.
Okay.
that's a Thursday?
Yep.
Let's see,
The 29th?
what time? 6 or
Did our fourth, did she ever get back in terms of what,
Back on the
21st, I think so.
right, but
22nd.
time of the day? I mean, is this a good time of the day for everyone, or
She was good with 6, wasn't she?
whatever more convenient for you guys?
4 to 5 works better.
I get paid by the minute. so
What
it
works
doesn't
better?
4 to 5
45.
4 to 5.
or 2 5.
Start at 4 o'clock.
Oh, 425. Yeah, that probably works for me. I mean, it just depends, but
I mean, we may have to shift it around. It works for me on the 29th. I
Okay.
can say
I
that.
don't have my work schedule in front of me, but that should be fine.
Are you available then?
I am.
Okay.
What time?
4.
4 p.m.
And this won't be the developer coming. No, your original intent was to have that thing.
No, one of the things I'll do is Tammy is reaching out to get, what the cost for someone else to partner to do some of that drawing. I'll reach out to the developer and speak to them, see what they can provide to us.
Because they've done a significant amount of work already that could probably be reused to some degree, honestly. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think it just would be supplemental if you needed it. If we ran into something where it was like, hey, wouldn't it be good if we had this product to help with the workshops or the visual preference survey or,
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking of, is in the visual piece. If we're going to be doing more, in this room, virtually, they may be willing to help.
It is something they theoretically would have to do. If they were going before Tampa, they would have to do a lot of these visioning boards and that sort of thing to present.
but they probably wouldn't be giving you all the,
Yeah, they wouldn't be giving you, but they would have an idea of what they used for their conceptual process. So they can get you 80% there on.
I mean,
what
really,
you
yeah,
need.
we're just talking about massing. What does the massing look like?
and I would think that a significant part of this too would be besides the buildings, it's everything else that the community may, have thoughts around, like the
Public spaces is going to be a huge.
street quality, what the walking environment is, the public spaces. I know that there was, I don't know, has there been talk about a river walk or some sort of a,
Yes.
feels like over the years that, that would be terrific.
Yeah, well,
But some stuff like that I think would be of probably equal importance to the community, or somewhat of equal importance. Because that's where they're going to be. Unless you're living or you're owning a business out there, the general public is going to want public places, the public realm has got to be nice.
No, and that's my understanding. That's a big part of the project, is to maintain that. Obviously, some of the developers they live in the city. I mean, so it's not like they're coming from just putting up some buildings, and
Yeah,
they actually live here. It's care community. So
sure. Yeah, they're creating a place. This is placemaking, right? It's not just a development. It's not a subdivision or whatever. This is place.
which is probably not normal, right?
Well-
Developers normally develop in their own areas. And that's kind of a unique
Well, like
Good thing.
Water Street, and they came in and, I mean, they totally transformed the whole place from soup to nuts. So it's sometimes if you have enough control of properties, then you can do that sort of thing. Well, awesome. Well, sorry I didn't have a presentation. I didn't know what the tenor of this was going to be, but I would have usually
Brainstorming.
slides or something to guide me.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Anything else?
I don't get the motion.
You can make a
No,
motion if you want.
it's not the same.
What do you mean you don't get the motion anymore?
I don't get the motion to adjourn.
Why not?
Because it's not, it's a committee, there's no motions.
Oh, no, go ahead and adjourn.
Okay, we're adjourned.
Go back and